Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this important webinar on current and future artificial intelligence trends in workplace safety. My name is Ade O'Neill, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's discussion. I'd also like to acknowledge the Health, Safety, and Environment Department here at the Port, whose team is working behind the scenes to support our question and answer session. They've also coordinated a week of activities, culminating tomorrow with a health and safety fair at Shed Number 3. Our discussion this morning resonates strongly with the International Labour Organization's 2025 theme, Revolutionizing Health and Safety, the Role of AI and Digitalization at Work. This global focus underscores the increasing recognition that technological advancements, particularly in AI and digitalization, are no longer just supplementary tools, but are becoming fundamental to transforming how we approach workplace safety. Here at the Port of Bridgetown, we wholeheartedly embrace this perspective, recognizing that the safety and well-being of our workforce is not merely a priority, but a fundamental imperative. That's why we're thrilled to be hosting this webinar in celebration of Safety Week 2025, bringing together some of BPI's very best to shed light on the transformative potential of artificial intelligence in this critical area. Joining us this morning is Captain Karl Branch, Divisional Manager, Innovation and Corporate Services here at BPI. Captain Branch is a certified artificial intelligence risk management architect under the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology. He holds the Certified Information Systems Security Professional designation and the Certified Port Executive designation. He retired as head of the Military Intelligence Unit at the Barbados Defense Force and was awarded the Barbados Defense Force Commendation for Performance in Intelligence. Karl represents the chairmanship of the Technical Advisory Group to the Inter-American Executive Committee on Ports, and he's also the chairman of the Stakeholder Steering Committee for the development of the innovative Barbados Port Community System. Karl has presented locally, regionally, and internationally, including at the World Smart Developing Ports Conference in Rotterdam on the topic of artificial intelligence, and he has been instrumental in the deployment of artificial intelligence in surveillance monitoring systems in use at the Port of Bristol. This system is the most advanced surveillance system developed and deployed in Barbados at present. Also joining us is Mr. Rommel Edwards, the Manager, Digital Innovation and Development at BPA. With over 25 years at BPA, Rommel has led the development of over 40 software solutions, streamlining port operations and trade facilitation. His key achievements include integrating customs Asakuda World with BPI systems, implementing BPI's first cloud-based terminal operating system, and launching BPI's first online payment platform. Under his leadership, BPI has earned multiple awards for innovation and technology. His department manages critical digital initiatives, including Barbados' Port Community System and the Barbados Maritime Single Window. Mr. Edwards is a certified port executive, certified NIST cybersecurity lead implementer, and certified NIST AI risk management architect. He chairs the Barbados Port Community Systems technical and cybersecurity committees and represents BPI on the steering committee for the Barbados Electronic Single Window for Trade. His expertise continues to drive digital transformation in Barbados's maritime sector. I think we can all agree that both these individuals bring a wealth of experience and unique perspectives on how technology can be leveraged to create safer workplaces. To ensure a smooth and productive session, here's a brief overview of our agenda. First, Captain Branch and Mr. Edwards will deliver a presentation for about 25 minutes. Following the presentations, I will facilitate a 15-minute guided discussion with our panelists, posing some key questions to delve deeper into the topic. I will then open the floor to your questions. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webinar in the comment section on the YouTube page. We'll do our best to address as many as possible. Finally, each panelist will have approximately 2 minutes for closing remarks to summarize their key takeaways. So let's get started. Captain Branch, Mr. Edwards, welcome. While you prepare to make your presentation, perhaps you can also share your initial thoughts on why the topic of AI in workplace safety is particularly relevant for the Port of Bridgetown at this moment.
So initially, the thoughts on AI are not only relevant to the Port of Bridgetown, but the entire world because of the uncertainty surrounding AI. And in many cases, the general mismanagement of expectations, there is a level of anxiety. And therefore, it is critical that not only at the port, but at all facets of Barbadian and regional operation, we take into account the tool that AI is, understand its potential and its limitations, and seek to benefit from it because the entire world is going to adopt AI as one of its main platforms for operation. That's simply because technology transcends business, and as technology evolves, business evolves, and Barbados will be no different.
All right, good morning, all. I agree 100% with Captain Branch. The other thing is that we are in another revolution. So we've had the Industrial Revolution, we've had the revolution from combustion engines into electrically driven engines. We've had the computer revolution. So there was a point where, and I remember a personal experience of mine, where decades ago, someone felt that computers had no place in the port. Fast forward to this current revolution, I actually had another personal experience where someone felt that AI had no place in the port. AI was meant for places like NASA and MIT and those sort of places. So we need to break that thinking. We need to let people know AI is here, the same way how people would have adapted to the implementation of computers and data-driven technology. The same approach has to be taken for AI. On top of that, because we're using a lot of more advanced technology, there's the associated risks with using that technology. So again, AI is here to help. It is a tool. Just embrace it, learn it, do not be scared, and yeah, everything should just work out.
Thank you. I believe we can go into the presentations this morning.
All right, thank you very much. So the topic of the presentation is really the trends in AI as it impacts safety. And one of the critical things to do is to actually define the difference between safety and security. Unfortunately, very often, both of these are used interchangeably. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the concept of AI is controversial at best and is even insulting to some, because some people figure, how can humans, which created machines, have an intelligence coming from an artificial creation that is just as good or faster than a human creation? So that's not what I want to debate, but I acknowledge that the anxiety exists. For the purpose of this presentation, let's define artificial intelligence as the ability for a computer to process large volumes of information. And let's define safety as the focus on preventing accidents, while security is the focus on preventing impacts based on deliberate threats. So the fundamental difference is that safety revolves around protection from accidents. And this is the context within which the AI and the AI solutions in this presentation will be based around safety and not necessarily around security, because very often the two are used interchangeably, but that is actually not the case.
All right, and before we proceed, we should also explain the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the two terms are used interchangeably, but really and truly, the machine learning is a subset of AI. So AI is actually not just a single technology. It is actually a broad spectrum of technologies aimed at making the computer mimic human intelligence. Machine learning is a major part of artificial intelligence. And what that does is allow a computer to adapt to situations over time. So rather than program a machine to say, let's say, for instance, if A happens, then do B. And if B happens, then do C, and so on. You program the machine to adapt to scenarios rather than try to account for all possible scenarios. As we go forward in the slides, we will also realize that there are other facets to AI. So there are other technologies involved in AI, and we have been using these technologies together to train BPI systems. Now, there was a article by Esmeralda Hernandez. She was at MIT, and it pretty much says that the human mind cannot process two things at once. And if you look at the slide in front of you, you realize eventually that is two embedded messages. And no matter how much you try, you will not be able to read both at once. What you may be able to do is to switch quickly between two sentences, but you're not going to be able to read them simultaneously. There are some more recent studies which suggest that, yes, in fact, under some circumstances, the human brain can process things in parallel, but it's extremely limited. And the more complex the task, the less probable it is to process in parallel. Now, this applies to ports because in a port, you have many things going on at once, and you have aspects of safety, there are risks. And to expect a human being to be able to process all of the things going around that person in real time is really a tall order. So this is where the AI will come in to assist a situation like that.
So we want our presentation to be as authentic as possible. It will not be based very often on the hypothetical or even the academic. It's actually going to be based on what we have achieved here at the port. Now, AI depends largely on the assimilation of large volumes of information. And very often that information is assimilated through cameras. At the port, we have what we term focus of attention, which is a function of video content analytics. Now, to give you an idea of what video content analytics is, even though, as Rommel said, you can have several streams of information coming at you at once, even though you can see it, even though you can recognize and appreciate that it is there, you actually can't analyze it. Take, for example, the concept of the traditional CCTV or monitoring station, where you have hundreds of cameras available to you. Yes, you can see hundreds of cameras at the same time, but can you analyze what's going on hundreds of cameras at the same time? Actually, no. Take a look at the screen. Imagine you were watching 50 movies all at the same time. 50 movies, none of which you had ever seen before. Theoretically, you can see 50 screens. You can see 50 movies. But if I ask you to tell me the storyline and the content and the details of every single movie, you can't, because you can only focus on one movie at a time. And this is the crux of video content analytics, the ability to have hundreds of streams, but yet have the computer analyze the contents of those streams all at the same time and bring them to your attention automatically based on artificial intelligence.
All right. And one of the supporting pillars of technology for what Captain Branch has just mentioned is computer vision. And this is where you enable a machine to quote unquote see. And what it does is that it recognizes images and video streams. So you now get into things like object recognition, object classification, pattern matching. There's a whole new set of technology you can do just based on the visual aspect of the computer system. So this has nothing to do with audio, just on visual capabilities. You can make certain decisions. Well, the machine can make certain decisions automatically. So it is a very big part of artificial intelligence, and it's known as computer vision. Within a port setting, using computer vision, you are able now to avert certain risks. You with enough historical data, you actually will be able to predict certain risks. And as you will see in the next slide, you'll see an application of computer vision. Now, in front of us, we have 4 pictures, and this is taken from the video stream. Now, during COVID, there was obviously the risk of the spread of the virus. So we had to enforce the wearing of personal protective equipment. We had to enforce the wearing of helmets, masks, the PPE jackets, full works. In the first photo, it just looks normal. You're seeing a group of people, everything looks normal. If you go to the second photo, the system has been trained to recognize human beings. It has been trained to recognize hard hats, which is all fine and dandy. If you go to the third photo, so this is the bottom left hand, you will see now the system has been trained to recognize the human beings who are wearing hard hats. And you will see by the bounding rectangles, it would actually pick up those matches for you. So again, based on what we said earlier, you don't have to focus on everyone. You just bring your focus of attention to the objects that are enclosed in the bounded rectangle. Now, in a situation like this, you see that most people are complying. So this is where you train your system to do some additional digging. And what you do is that you introduce an exception. And what the exception does is that it shows the few human beings who are non-compliant. And you will see in the bottom right-hand corner where we've trained the camera feed to just report the person, or it could be a group of people who are non-compliant. And you will see straight away that there's one person in the picture who is non-compliant with the rules that were enforced. And this goes a long way in averting risks that you would expect to find in a maritime environment.
So how does this really happen? We train the system to identify objects of interest to us. But then the system recognizes changes in patterns over time. And utilizing the inferences that the system will derive from those changes, it then feeds this information back into itself. In actuality, it is learning. It is looking at information. It is coming to a conclusion based on whatever our specifics or our business rules are. And then it is making inferences based on logic and reasoning. So as the system can identify any particular object once we train it to do so, this is called detection. But as that object moves from frame to frame to frame, which is what we call video, it acknowledges the appearance of that object for every frame, and it tracks it from frame to frame across systems, across cameras. And this is what we refer to as tracking. But when it takes the information and analyzes it and produces a logical inference of not only what it thinks it means based on our business rules, but an expectation of what will happen next, we refer to this as mathematical reasoning. And this is the basis of what we call intelligence. Therefore, the role of this system is to assimilate much more information than we possibly could in any given unit of measure of time, and to draw inferences faster than we can. So how does this practical application applied at the port? And what is the trend for this for the future? So what we see is typically what existed before. Hundreds of cameras, lots of information. Actually, for a human being, this is information overload. Even though the information is present, even though the data is there, even though the video streams are live, it is biologically impossible, certainly neurologically challenging for a person to see and analyze and assimilate all of this information at the same time. So what we have at the port is what we refer to as focus of intelligence. Now, focus of intelligence is actually the first derivative at the port of artificial intelligence based on video content analytics. The officers would sit and they actually would not look at all. There are several hundred cameras. I won't say the number, there's several hundred. They would not look at those typically. What they look at is the instances of movement or unusual movement or expectations which are derived from the machine and automatically brought up for their viewing. So on the right, these little hexagonal dots, each one of these represents a camera or a view from a camera. And each color represents the system's determination of what is happening with that camera. If the camera is offline, it is one color. If there's movement, it's another color. If there's unusual movement, there's another color. If there was a safety prescription, so for example, if a particular camera, let's say the camera at the gate, and if he prescribed, using Rommel's previous example, if he prescribed the system to inform us whenever a person walked past there without a helmet or without a vest, bring it to our attention automatically and give us an actual text narrative, tell us what that is. So you just sit and the cameras recognize deviations from the business rules, deviation from the safety rules, and the camera says, here's a person without a vest. Here's a person without a helmet. Here's a person entering the wrong gate. This is not the proper safety protocol. So therefore, for the first time, you have a very close association of the ports, between the ports health and safety unit and the ports technology units, where the mandate of the safety unit is prescribed into a technological platform to perform instances of automatic identification. The next step is to bring this information out of the technological side of the port directly to the safety enforcers. We do it for security right now, and the next step is to do it for the safety enforcers so that they are well aware whenever there is a violation anywhere in the port, even if that violation is not seen by a person, it will be seen and determined by our surveillance system.
And why are we doing all of this? So within the context of what we're celebrating this week, the overall objective is to reduce risk and to heighten alertness and awareness. And we use this objective video content analysis in order to achieve that. And what we do is that we extract and present probably about around 2-3%, because most of the video content you will find, if you use a risk management approach, most of your video content actually would not indicate an imminent risk. But then there's that 2, maybe 3%. That's based on what we've done so far. Those figures could change. But that 2 or 3%, that information is presented, that information is analyzed, and is presented to the safety enforcers. You have a logical inference that is employed, so the safety enforcers can now see what the potential risks, and not just that there is a risk involved. They can actually see what that risk is. And what we expect that will start to happen as this system develops and as it matures and as it learns is that we can actually apply, prediction technology to this. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. Now, we also incorporate Internet of Things. So this is where we have a lot of different devices that are interconnected and they use internet technology as well. And when coupled with AI, things get very interesting because now we have sensors, we have body-worn devices. There are a full set of things that we can now achieve. So things like monitoring air temperature, things like monitoring pollution, things like monitoring sound levels, all of those things now come into view. We can actually do predictive modeling. And what happens is that before a situation arises, you have the capacity now to shut down a device or to alert your staff not to enter a certain area. So there's a whole set of possibilities and a whole set of predictions that you can use in terms of risk management. And just a little fun fact, we would have launched our maritime single window. We would have done that last year. We actually rolled it out rolled out another step about roughly a month ago, and we are now issuing certificates of clearance electronically to our vessels. Now, the thing about that is that we are actually going to move on from that, and there's an aspect to do with reporting to MARPOL reporting, and this is another mandate by the IMO. And again, there's a safety aspect of this because the longer your vessel stays in port, the more air pollution it generates, the more sound pollution it generates. So there's not only the risk to employees, but there's also the risk to the surrounding community of which the port has a responsibility to protect. There's also the risk to the marine environment, which the port also has the responsibility.
So how does that impact directly on safety? Well, there are several different AI-enabled initiatives. The first and the most obvious would probably be wearable devices, where you can wear what we call smart helmets, vests, wristbands. And these would track things like, heart rate, temperature, etc. But even easier than that, and this goes back to the video content analytics, even easier than that is the use of cameras. Cameras and the systems that we have right now have both facial detection, which is to detect that this is a human being, and facial recognition, which takes facial detection one step further and compares it against a known picture of a person. How does that impact safety? How can it impact safety in the workplace? Well, one of the most straightforward and proven methods is something called blink rate. As we know, when you get tired, when you get sleepy, your blink rate slows down. Instead of a typical fast blink rate, our eyes tend to do like this. And we blink rather slowly. And then is not off like that. A camera can recognize this. A camera can note the typical blink rate of a person and note when that blink rate has slowed down. And if that camera is connected to a system and it makes the logical inference, this person is falling asleep. And this camera is mounted in a vehicle, in a forklift, in any workplace vehicle, actually. Actually, we probably expect to see this technology fairly soon in domestic cars. Once you start to blink too slowly and it appears as though you're falling asleep, your vehicle will stop. This has direct potential and benefits for a high-paced, highly mechanized environment like the port. So an example of this would be persons driving heavy-duty equipment. If the system determines your blink rate has slowed down to a rate that is typical for you when you are falling asleep, so I'm going to turn off the ignition. And that is a direct way that the use of artificial intelligence, the autonomous decision-making predicated on a standard biological norm can impact the safety of drivers. And this can be applied in many other aspects.
Now, of course, with the advent of all this technology, you will want a way to test it before you actually deploy it into a live environment. And this is where AI plays a major role. So you can have virtual reality simulations. So imagine a normal camera feed. So that's your reality. You have a normal camera feed and it's actually giving you footage of an actual environment. You combine that with AI and you have your virtual environment. So very much like video games. You combine the reality and the virtual reality, you combine those together, and now you get into augmented reality. And this is where you have a blend of artificial intelligence driven virtual reality as well as your standard camera feed. And imagine how you can take a simulation, conduct your simulation in a real environment, but then you still have the control over it. So if anything were to go wrong again, using all the technologies we would have discussed before, you will be alerted to that risk before it happens.
So a year ago, we had a situation in the port where a container which was filled with a highly explosive and flammable liquid, fell over. Typically speaking, this would have presented a challenge for our fire and safety and first response services because this was a highly volatile and dangerous situation, a situation that without artificial intelligence, without the use of technology, would have placed the responders in imminent danger. As I said, wherever we can refer to actual activities that took place in the port, we will do so. This is the actual drone footage from that particular incident. And the port's drones flew over the area before the fire service and the first responders could respond. And the drones determined by measuring the placement of heat and volatile liquids on the ground and within the container, where the safest areas to approach this accident would be. And this was communicated directly to the Barbados Fire Service. The members of the fire service, using the information coming from our drones and the inferences drawn based on the location of the heat signatures on the ground, sent directly to our command center and then passed on to our Barbados Fire Service. This collaboration of information was integral into the safe recovery of this tank. Had it not been for the presence of drones and the technology that the drones offer, if it was not for the ability to artificially infer the information that was gathered and to make a decision and weigh the different outcomes to provide the least riskiest option for the Barbados Fire Service, this situation could have turned out completely differently. And as I said, this is an example of where artificial intelligence made decisions that safely allow members of the Barbados Response Services, the fire services, police, port security, and most importantly, our port workers who are the ones instrumental in actually moving the tank to operate in a safe environment.
And speaking of safe environments, this is another technology that we are embarking on, and it's called digital twinning. And this is where you create a completely virtual copy, a virtual replica of your physical environment. And this opens several avenues for exploration. So combining everything that we've discussed before, combining the object recognition, which is a part of the computer vision, combining the machine learning, combining all of those technologies in a virtual environment, we now can set up a digital twin of Barbados Port Inc. And what that means is that we can model certain scenarios. And the good thing about this is that, let's say we modeled preparation for a tsunami, and our model failed. There's something we did not take into account, and the entire port was obliterated. We can just recreate it in a virtual environment. We would not want to do that in the physical environment. So this is where the digital twinning plays a very key role in terms of health and safety. We have been able to put forward this idea. It has now been embraced by the Barbados government. So we have actually entered into discussions with a team out of the UAE, and we have started the process of implementing digital twinning. So there's a pilot. It begins in May this year, and this is in connection with the EU and I believe some companies of the UAE. But this will enable BPI to do some advanced simulations of digital twinning, advanced simulations of certain scenarios, certain events, and we can actually make predictions. And once the digital twin tells us, okay, this is how it will work, we implement them in real time, in the real environment, and we are 100% prepared for any eventuality. And we at this point just want to thank you for listening to us. We are very excited about this technology. It presents many advantages for risk management, many advantages for safety. So just stay with us. We are prepared to answer any questions that you may want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Branch. Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for that insightful presentation. It's clear that AI has the potential to reshape the workplace safety, especially in dynamic environments such as the Port of Bridgetown. Just a reminder, we welcome the comments on the YouTube page. I haven't seen any as yet, but I guess you're reminiscing on the presentation that was just given. But we want to hear your comments. But in the meantime, let's delve deeper into some of these key areas. Starting with Rommel, what specific technologies or applications you believe hold the most promise for enhancing workplace safety within a port environment? Not necessarily only a port environment, but any logistics space.
So one of the things that really stands out is the computer vision, because this is where, so there's the old adage about, two pairs of eyes better than one pair. So when you incorporate AI-driven video feeds and AI-driven image processing, this now brings, imagine, several pairs of eyes to the form. So based on what the camera sees, what the machine sees, the machine is able to alert you to certain risks, certain safety measures. And this goes a long way because we are handling a lot more cargo traffic. We are handling a lot more pedestrian traffic, a lot more cruise terminals, cruise passengers. So using this computer vision technology, it goes a long way in assisting the human enforcer to enforce certain security standards, certain safety standards. So for me, out of all these technologies, the computer vision is the one that goes a long way. And of course, we can't forget the machine learning that is pretty much the background of artificial intelligence, because all the other technologies, they connect with the machine learning because the machine has to adapt and has to pretty much gain intelligence based on all the data being fed to it via these other technologies.
Machine learning, computer visioning. This sounds very expensive, very pricey. Captain Branch, you're a port executive, the senior management team here at the port. You have a balancing act. Can we really implement this in AI and all these different tools? I know we started, but can we go a step further on incorporating the AI specific technologies for safety in a small port? Does the capital outlay associated with all these technologies justify it?
I know that this response might find the ear of the financial controller, but it is not only justifiable, it is expected. What is the financial value of a human life? The lives of our teammates, the lives of our staff, the lives of our workers. That's the fundamental responsibility we have. Everything else that we do at the port is predicated on a safe working environment. Because without a working environment, without staff, the port can do nothing. And if staff, yes, the port is inherently a dangerous place to work. So too are many other highly mechanized environments. So as an executive, we are duty bound to provide as many safety initiatives as we possibly can, not as we possibly can afford, as we possibly can. Every dollar we earn is earned as a result of our staff operating in as safe an environment as possible. So therefore, we have no option whatsoever. Once the technology is there, and once we can demonstrate how that technology can better the safety environment for our staff, we have to put it in place. That is our main responsibility. Everything else is a function, is a complete derivative of staff operating in safe environments. So to answer your question succinctly, I cannot place a financial price tag on the lives of our staff, and therefore I cannot place a financial price tag on the safety or the measure of safety of our environments. We just have to do it. And I'm sure, however, that once we as port officers and port workers are satisfied that we are given the best that money can buy, it will incentivize us to perform even better. Thanks.
That's a beautiful response. You should like to know, I know we're not at the question and answer segment from the public, but you should like to know that part of our accounting team, management team, asked a pertinent question. It wasn't the financial controller, but the management accountant. She asked, how can AI improve our revenues at the port?
All right, so one of the things that AI can do is improve your productivity, and that is directly a revenue stream. The other thing about the AI is that we can use the AI then and we have an example already with our maritime single window. There are aspects of it where we are engaging AI technology. There are other ports that are seeing this, and rather than build systems for themselves, they're engaging our services. So that's another revenue stream. We have instances where we, for instance, can use the AI to aid in vessel traffic management. You can use the AI to aid in resource allocation. And again, once you remove those bottlenecks, once you can increase turnaround times, all of that will contribute to your revenue stream. So yes, there's an upfront cost for implementing technology, but as you would realize over the passage of time, you would actually have a return on investment for that
Sticking with you, Rommel, how do you approach balancing the same benefits for incorporating AI safety with the concerns that staff may have regarding increased surveillance, especially with the video content analytics you spoke about in your presentation? Are there any conflicts with our data privacy laws? And bearing in mind, we're also in a heavily unionized environment. Are there any privacy concerns for port workers, or not necessarily only port workers, but for any organization that is heavily unionized?
All right, that's actually an excellent question. And it's a question that I get a lot in other forums. So when Captain Branch and when we completed our NIST, which is National Institute of Science and Technology, when we completed our AI Risk Management Framework Architect course there, it wasn't just about the artificial intelligence. It was also about the risks involved and the governance of that technology. And one of the things that we learned is, you have to set up, you don't just implement these technologies in a silo. There are aspects to it. So as you mentioned, the data privacy, as you mentioned, things like policy, things like legislation. So when we look at our data privacy laws, or even if we go further abroad, we look at like GDPR, those pieces of legislation, they are more concerned with data privacy for individuals. So they're more concerned with if you can go into a system and pull content, let's say on you are there or on Captain Branch. That is what those pillars of legislation are trying to prevent. So as you feed information into an AI system, you have the responsibility to anonymize that information. You have a responsibility to scrub it, to sanitize it, so that you get information on the general population, you get information on the general assets, but you don't have information on an individual. So even going back to the examples that we use where you can use the computer vision, you can use the object recognition to recognize a person that is in violation of a safety protocol. You are not going to store that person's information in your system. So the system records that it has detected someone in violation, brings that to the attention of the security enforcers, and then it is up to that security or safety enforcer to then address that situation. But that would happen outside of the system. So all the system does is bring the attention to that person. So in this way, you have a system that's populated with information, but it has information on the general population of BPI and not on individuals.
I would like to add to that, Ade, as well, especially the part you said about the unionized environment. So the union is the protector of workers' rights. But fundamental to the protection of workers' rights is the protection of workers' lives. Now, when you combine the safety and the security aspect, especially in a port environment, the port is a highly secure environment. And therefore, in cases of emergencies, under a manual operation, sometimes it is less than efficient to exit the port or exit a port building en masse because of the inherent security built in to operating a port. Using AI, and when we compare this to the drills that we had, a few years ago, the port had a tsunami drill and we had an earthquake drill. And we realized the difficulty in exiting the port and exiting the building during a tsunami or during an earthquake just from a drill because of all of the human decision making in an unfamiliar environment or dealing with an unfamiliar situation. And that slowed the entire process down. Now, let's say as we continue to develop our systems, many of our gate and door systems are fail safe, which means if there is a failure of electricity, some of them remain closed. Sorry, fail secure. Some of them remain closed. But then we also have the option of something called fail safe. If there's an issue, these doors will automatically open. Now you have artificial intelligence now with your cameras that determine if all of these cameras are shaking at the same time. That most likely is an earthquake. And because this is an earthquake, what you will do is you will open all of your doors, all of your gates automatically. Now that gives the response time a physical portal through which to leave the port in a hurry, but there was no human decision making or action in that. The cameras made a determination, we are having an earthquake. And the inference to draw is people will have to leave the port. Let's open these gates. So that's just one example. But from a safety perspective, everything that we can think about, we will put into our systems, and the systems will learn from them, derive their inferences, and then continue to learn from the manifestations of their own internal drills. What happens if the expectation of if the port only has 10 people in it versus if it has 2,000 people in it? How will I know this? Well, the system, the AI in our cameras have people counting. So there is an understanding of the number of people, once you come through an authorized gate, the number of people inside the port at any given time. And further, this safety information not only benefits the port, but it benefits the port's stakeholders. The port now has a fire station, and the fire station is responsible from a fire perspective for safety of persons in the port. If the fire station is making a decision, if there's a fire in the port, if there's a fire on board a vessel, the fire service has to make certain decisions, and many parts of those decisions depend on how many people are inside the port, how many people have to move from this area. And the only way to get that answer in a matter of seconds is from the artificial intelligence inferences of your systems. Because every person entering the port, whether through a gate, whether off a ship, has to pass a camera. That camera is going to count. The same thing applies for vehicles, license plate readers, container numbers. The information is too vast for persons to sit down and calculate in an emergency. And safety is paramount when there is good decision making in an emergency, and time is critical. So this is another aspect where artificial intelligence facilitates the decision making in an emergency much more efficiently than we can do because we don't even have the information upon which to form that decision.
We have another public question. Aya Collymore, one of the concerns for workers is that the more AI is introduced, the more jobs will be lost. How real a concern is this, and what measures can be put in place to protect job losses?
All right. And that is a very valid concern. It is the same concern that we had years ago when we were introducing computer technology into,
Computers.
yes, same concerns. And what happened back then? No one lost a job, not a single person. We had people who embraced the technology from the get-go and they utilize it. They were the early adopters. That always happens. Then we had the skeptics who waited. And there's one example that I always remember, and that was the first forklift driver that held a tablet in Shed 2. And Shed 2, our personal effects warehouse, that was largely paper driven. And we introduced computer technology. We then went a step further and we introduced mobile technology. And there was that one forklift driver who held a tablet. And what happened, what people realized is that he was actually retrieving cargo at a much quicker rate than the others who were still sifting through papers or sometimes using the computers. And we predict the same thing is going to happen with AI. You're going to have those early adopters, you're going to have those skeptics, and then there are going to be some people who will refuse to embrace it. And fortunately, those people are the minority, and you will find that some of those people, they either retire before using it, or they're eventually forced because they realize, well, they're now going into obsolescence. So we don't anticipate, any job losses. What we would see is a lot of upskilling. So where a person would normally use, let's say, documents, so they have the same job function, but you would see that person now using the tools that are available. And you may even see some improvements to the job function. So a person, for instance, that just, handles cargo, their job function could actually adapt and could include other aspects of the usage of technology. So that person now, because they've become, the AI has enabled them to become more productive. They're actually doing a lot more in a short space of time. And you have a turnaround in your productivity. You have a reduction in your turnaround time, in your cargo handling, as well as your cruise passenger handling. So just like when we introduced computers to BPI, there was a large scale introduction and we had these concerns. We get these concerns now, but just like back then, we did not see any job losses, and we don't expect to see that now unless we have someone who outright refuses to adopt it.
So Ade, I want to add to that. The only thing I believe in more than artificial intelligence is the intelligence of Barbadians and the intelligence of port workers. We are a subset of Barbadians. Now, I'll tell you a story. I remember when Rommel and I, we were going to the World Smart Port Conference in Rotterdam, and we got pulled out the line by immigration. And immigration told us, they looked at our passports and they said, where are you here? We said, we are delivering the keynotes at the Smart Port Conference. And said, Barbados? I've never heard of this country. And we said, you will. Now, Barbados is a very small country and it has punches above its weight when it comes to the advancement, especially with technology and the use of technology and new methods of learning and execution by its people. And the port is a prime example of that. Every piece of technology that has been implemented or advanced at the port is now used today by port workers. So the artificial intelligence that we just demonstrated from our command center, that's not being operated by people at NASA. That's being operated by port security. The different aspects of our safety that's operated by our staff. The drones that flew in to gather information and make logical inferences when that tank turned over, those were flown by port staff. And I say all that to say that once we are willing to learn, we will be the users of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is just a tool. It is just a tool. And once we recognize that we can master this tool and exploit it even, there will not only be no job losses in that regard, but there will be a requirement for people who understand this technology to use it. I actually believe that the port, it has started already, is going to become the icon of advancement for Greater Barbados in terms of its technology. So therefore, the icons of advancement, the users of this technology will be users at the port, but we'll be doing it for Greater Barbados. As we speak, the team at the port is developing a government information portal. So activities that pertain to wider government, yes, there is a part that has to do with the port, but for wider government, and that's being developed by members of the port team. So we ought not fear the arrival of artificial intelligence. The second thing is the theory of relativity. It is relevant not only in physics, but in business. So if we decide that we will not use artificial intelligence, our competitors will. And that will place us in a less than advantageous position from a business perspective. So to remain in front, we have to remain in front the innovation and technology curve, and using artificial intelligence is that. So that is actually one of the platforms that will support us as we continue to give a level of service more advanced than our competitors. And as a Barbadian, this is fundamental to the support systems of Greater Barbados.
And just, to jump on what Captain Brandt said, a real world scenario. So last year, Captain Brandt and I, we had to go to Washington to the OAS, did a presentation. Coming off of that, when he went off to Guatemala, I went off to Dubai, where I presented our maritime single window there, and where I also showed how we were leveraging AI in that. And their port, there was a port in attendance. There were several other people in the logistics sector as well, but some representatives from one of the ports there, they actually opined that based on how we are using the technology, that they actually expected to Barbadians to adopt this technology, and they did not expect any massive follow in terms of jobs. So once we show them how the maritime single window was intelligently processing documents, so you upload a PDF, it intelligently processes this, it determines which entity the data should go to, and it sends that data. We demonstrated all of that, and they realize, well, hey, this will actually boost productivity and will not cause any job cancellations. And this is a port in Dubai when it was presented there.
Thank you. Well, now, thank you, Karl. We're soon at the end of the webinar. We actually have to wind up now. I don't know if both Karl and Rommel, if you want to give 30 seconds, any closing remarks?
All right. So for me, it is, we're talking about AI. There are people who have fears. They're genuine fears. This happens with anything new, and I would advise, as I've said in a forum yesterday, you use it responsibly. You don't use it, for any and everything. You are very careful with what data you feed into the system, because once you feed data into a system, there's no way of taking it back out. The data is there, and you would realize that with a lot of the online systems. So we have an instance, for instance, with ChatGPT, where Samsung employees were using it to help with their problems. And what happened is that a lot of Samsung's internal business secrets, business rules ended up on the internet because they fed this data system. So we don't want to repeat something like that. You have the technology, but you use it responsibly. It is a tool. It is not here to replace you. It is here to assist you. And that would be my message to anyone who is embarking on this road.
My message is there was a time in our history when information was not readily available to us, where education was not readily available to us, where the opportunity to engage in what will be then advanced practices, these things were not available to us, and all that has changed. All that has changed because of our social systems, our educational systems. We as Barbadians have at our disposal the ability to learn, gain information about anything. At the port, we have opportunities regarding training across the board, certainly where technology is concerned. My parting words would be let us take advantage of these opportunities. Let us take advantage, understand these tools, and use them. The fear is not AI in and of itself. The fear is what happens in a world where AI is prevalent among all of our stakeholders and our competitors, and we don't know how to use it when everybody else is. That creates an complete imbalance of potential. And when it comes to the potential, we want to have the greatest amount of our people combined with our technologies. The good thing is, unlike many other technologies that are typically bought off the shelf and therefore not necessarily perfectly made for our small island developing state environment, these technologies very often are deployed, designed by our teams at the port and in Barbados. So we have tailor-made artificial intelligent applications, probably the first time in history. So we should continue as a nation, as a port, to be the trendsetters. We should continue to be the leaders in what will become commonplace 5 years from now. But we can't wait until 5 years from now to recognize that this will be the norm. So there's a saying, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So my parting words is, let me continue to create the future. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
This morning, we've explored the current landscape of AI in workplace safety and glimpsed at the exciting possibilities for the future. The discussion highlighted not only the benefits of AI in preventing accidents and improving safety outcomes, but also the importance of careful planning, responsible and ethical considerations, and collaboration with stakeholders. For the Port of Bridgetown, the challenge now lies in translating these insights into actionable strategies. I want to extend my sincerest gratitude to Captain Karl Branch and Mr. Rommel Edwards for their insightful contributions here this morning. And I'd also like to thank Irwin and his health and safety team for putting this webinar together and for the entire week of activities, which culminates tomorrow with a health and safety fair at Shed 3. I'd also like to thank Shane and his team for providing the technical support here this morning for this webinar. And then finally, I want to thank you that asked your questions and also for watching and participating in this webinar. Your engagement is vital as we work towards creating safer and healthier workplaces for all. Thank you, everyone.